You can't touch this. The beat drops and the crowd moves, and MC Hammer isn't just making music. He's representing a city that once stood as one of the most powerful Black cultural hubs in America. Scope News presents a deep dive. Oakland in the 1980s was not simply a place on a map. It was a living, breathing center of Black life, built from the Great Migration, sustained by shipyard jobs, and shaped by generations of families who turned the city into something deeply rooted and unmistakably their own. This was also the home of the Black Panther Party, founded in 1966 by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Oakland was not just culturally Black, it was politically powerful, organized, and influential. The city became a national symbol of Black resistance, community programs, and self-determination, from free breakfast initiatives to neighborhood patrols that challenged police brutality. Now fast forward to today, and that same Oakland is being described in reports, headlines, and first-hand accounts as something entirely different. The culture is still there in fragments, echoes, and memories, but the people who built it are no longer present in the same numbers. And that shift is not just a feeling, it is backed by data that tells a much larger story. By 1980, Oakland was approximately 47% Black, making it one of the most significant Black majority cities on the West Coast. Today, that number has dropped to around 20%, a decline so steep that it cannot be explained away as a natural demographic shift. When a population is reduced by more than half within a few decades, it raises a deeper question about what forces were at play behind the scenes. The answer does not lie in one single event, but rather in a series of interconnected decisions, policies, and economic pressures that unfolded over time and reshaped the city layer by layer. The foundation of this shift can be traced back to policy decisions that date as far back as 1935, when Oakland implemented zoning laws that effectively restricted where Black families could live. These policies did not just shape neighborhoods. They created boundaries that would later determine who had access to opportunity and who did not. As the decades progressed, so-called urban renewal projects in the 1960s through the 1980s introduced freeway construction, BART expansion, and large-scale redevelopment efforts that cut directly through established Black communities such as West Oakland. These changes were not neutral or evenly distributed. Families were displaced, often without meaningful support, and relocated into other parts of the city like East Oakland. What was framed publicly as progress often resulted in the fragmentation of long-standing communities, and once those networks were broken, rebuilding them became increasingly difficult. The next major blow came through economic destabilization, particularly during the foreclosure crisis between 2007 and 2011. Black homeowners in Oakland were disproportionately targeted with subprime loans, many of which carried terms that made long-term ownership unsustainable. When the housing market collapsed, these families lost homes that had often been passed down through generations, effectively stripping away both financial stability and cultural continuity. Oakland's own housing analysis has acknowledged that Black homeownership in neighborhoods like Brookfield Village and Sobrante Park was severely impacted during this period. The loss of ownership meant the loss of control, and once that control disappeared, the pace of change in the city accelerated dramatically. By the 2010s, Oakland became an extension of San Francisco's tech-driven housing demand, drawing in wealthier residents who were priced out of neighboring areas. Investors followed closely behind, and the real estate market responded quickly. Between 2010 and 2020, home values in Oakland increased by more than 120%, while rental prices surged to levels that placed significant strain on longtime residents. Today, the median home price approaches $900,000, and average rents hover near $2,000 per month. For many Black families, these numbers are not just high, they are unsustainable. Over 53% of Black households in Oakland are considered cost burden, meaning they spend a disproportionate share of their income just to maintain housing. At the same time that Black residents were being pushed out, the city was experiencing an influx of new populations. Immigration patterns brought growth in Latino, Asian, and international communities, contributing to Oakland becoming more than 27% foreign-born, with over 40% of households speaking a language other than English at home. This shift was not necessarily orchestrated as a direct replacement, but in practice, it resulted in a transformation of the city's demographic makeup. The housing market did not pause to account for cultural continuity. It responded to who could afford to stay, and over time, that reality reshaped entire neighborhoods. Legal battles further exposed the intensity of these pressures. In June 2016, the case City of Oakland versus Kilpatrick revealed allegations that landlords in Chinatown deliberately made housing conditions unlivable by removing kitchens, damaging units, and posting notices only in English to drive out existing tenants. This strategy created opportunities to replace lower-income residents with higher-paying renters. In June 2019, the case People versus Dodg Corp uncovered landlords renting unsafe and illegal units to vulnerable tenants, many of them immigrants. One of the most visible moments in this ongoing struggle occurred during the Moms for Housing protest, when Black mothers occupied a vacant home owned by Wedgwood Properties in 2019. Their protest drew national attention because it highlighted a stark contradiction. Homes were sitting empty, while families were struggling to find stable housing. In January 2020, the mothers were forcibly evicted, a move that sparked widespread debate and even drew concern from then-Mayor Libby Schaaf, who publicly expressed shock at how the situation was handled. Even beyond housing access, discrimination has continued to surface in modern forms. In 2025, California's Civil Rights Department reported a case in which a Black and Latino Oakland family received a home appraisal that undervalued their property by $254,000. Faced with that disparity, they were ultimately forced to sell, demonstrating that structural inequities in housing persist even in the present day. Leadership at the state and local levels has been forced to respond to the city's challenges. Jerry Brown eliminated redevelopment funding in 2011, a move that removed a key financial tool cities used to invest in infrastructure and housing. Years later, Sheng Thao called for additional state assistance as conditions worsened. On February 6, 2024, Gavin Newsom described Oakland's crime trends as alarming and unacceptable, and deployed 120 California Highway Patrol officers to address rising concerns about safety. Oakland has long carried the weight of national attention when it comes to policing and justice, from protests to tragedy, including the 2009 killing of Oscar Grant at Fruitvale Station, a moment that still lingers as a reminder that something has always been shifting beneath the surface, and that sense of change has never fully left the air. Crime has played a visible role in shaping public perception of the city. In July 2021, a woman sitting in traffic near Broadway had her window smashed in broad daylight during a robbery that was captured on camera. That same year, police reported carjackings had increased by more than 100%. By 2023, Oakland recorded over 13,000 car break-ins, reinforcing the sense among residents that daily life had become more unpredictable. The impact of these conditions has extended into the business community. In January 2024, In-N-Out Burger announced the closure of its Oakland location, marking the first time the company had ever shut down a store. The decision was attributed to ongoing concerns about crime, including repeated break-ins and safety risks. Shortly afterward, Denny's, their 601 Hagenberger location, closed after more than 5 decades of operation, citing similar challenges. Reports indicated that the surrounding area had experienced over 1,300 police incidents since 2019, illustrating the scale of the issue. As businesses began to leave, the city's reputation shifted, and comparisons to fictional crime-ridden environments began to circulate among residents and commentators, calling Oakland Gotham City. Lost in these discussions, however, is the deeper reality that Oakland was once more than a city. It was part of a broader network of Black communities across the Bay Area. Just miles away stood Russell City, a thriving Black and multicultural town that was ultimately erased through redevelopment in the 1960s. Residents were displaced, businesses were demolished, and over time, the town was wiped off the map. Decades later, officials would acknowledge the harm done, but by then, the community itself was gone. That history is important to mention because it shows a pattern. Oakland was one of the last major Black strongholds in the region after places like Russell City disappeared, and now even Oakland has undergone a transformation that has reduced the visibility and concentration of its black population. When people say there are barely any black residents left in Oakland, it reflects a broader truth about the scale of change that has taken place. The density, visibility, and influence of the black community have been significantly reduced, leaving behind a city that feels fundamentally different from what it once was. This transformation did not occur because of a single cause. It emerged from overlapping forces, including policy decisions, economic crises, rising housing costs, demographic shifts tied to immigration, discrimination, crime, business closures, and political actions. Each factor alone might not have been enough to reshape the city, but together they created a cumulative effect that is difficult to ignore. The larger question extends beyond Oakland itself. When a community builds a city over generations, only to find itself gradually priced out, displaced, and diminished, it forces a deeper examination of how urban change is understood. Whether labeled as development, revitalization, or something else entirely, the outcome remains the same for those who are no longer able to stay in the place they once called home. And that raises a final question that continues to linger, not just in Oakland, but in cities across the country. If the people who built a place are no longer able to live in it, what does that say about who that place was truly built for in the first place? Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. This report draws from U.S. Census historical data on Oakland demographics, California housing, and civil rights reports, coverage of the Moms 4 housing case, 2019-2020, court records from People vs. Dodg Corp, 2019-2022, reporting on the 2020 foreclosure of In-N-Out and Denny's in Oakland, statements from Governor Gavin Newsom on February 6, 2024, Oakland Police Department crime statistics from 2021-2023, and historical documentation on Russell City and urban renewal in the Bay Area. Legal disclaimer. This content is provided for educational, informational, and commentary purposes. Scope News aims to present historically grounded narratives based on publicly available data, news reports, and documented events. However, some interpretations may reflect broader social analysis and should not be taken as definitive legal or factual conclusions. Viewer discretion is advised, especially when discussing sensitive topics such as race, displacement, and crime.